want to get right to the White House. CNN's Betsy Klein is live there this morning. Clearly, the White House knows there are questions, and not just from Democrats this time.
Yeah, they are facing questions from both sides of the aisle about whether they potentially committed a war crime. And this comes after our colleague Natasha Bertrand reported over the weekend that the U.S. military carried out a second strike on an alleged drug boat operating in the Caribbean on September 2nd after it was assessed that a first strike did not kill anyone on board. Sources familiar with the matter say that when the initial strike appeared to disable the boat and cause deaths, it was then determined that there were survivors. A second strike was launched on that boat, killing 11 people in total and sinking the ship. Now, one of the sources says that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered the military before this operation to ensure that everybody aboard was killed. It is not clear if he knew that people were alive after that first strike. Now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill now calling for investigations and questioning the legality of this. President Trump fielding questions from reporters as he made his way back to Washington last night. Listen.
Number one, I don't know that happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't have wanted that, not a second strike.
Now, the U.S. military has amassed a massive show of force in the region and carried out about 20 known strikes on these drug vessels in the Caribbean, plus one in the Eastern Pacific. There are about 15,000 U.S. troops in the region, along with more than a dozen warships. And we are learning that this evening the president will hold a key meeting with top members of his cabinet to discuss next steps. John.
Yeah, I keep hearing that sound from the president. The verbiage is so interesting there. He doesn't categorically say there wasn't a second strike. That's what Congress wants to investigate right now, and that in and of itself may raise some very thorny questions. Betsy Klein, thank you very much for your reporting on this. Kate.
Yeah, which raises even more questions now, John, with this meeting at the White House you just reported on is happening happening tonight on this very issue. Joining us right now to talk more about it, CNN senior military analyst, retired Admiral James Stavridis, a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, part of the Carlyle Group. It's great to see you again. You also ran Southern Command, so you know this region well. I want to play for you another piece of sound. We had Senator Angus King on this morning. What he said.
It's all about the facts, Kate. The law is clear. If the facts are as have been alleged, that there was a second strike specifically to kill the survivors in the water, that's a stone-cold war crime.
Admiral, are we looking at a possible war crime, and who gives that order? Who would know?
Yes, I think Senator King is exactly right. I think the president is right when he says he would not have wanted that. I can't imagine any American would want us to machine gun survivors in the water. This is the functional equivalent of that. World War II, the Nazis did that. We didn't do that. So I think this one screams for a serious, under oath investigation. And I think that's what we're going to see. In terms of who gave the order, certainly the Secretary of Defense would have authorized the mission. He would have authorized the level of force, the lethality of the mission. After that, Kate, it becomes a tactical question, who actually gave the order for the second strike. This is exactly why we need a thorough investigation with a real timeline, a tick-tock, who said what, when, what was the result. But I can't imagine any American believes that we should be machine gunning people that are floating in the water, clearly not a threat to the United States.
Also, Admiral, you've been really helpful in gauging kind of the odds, if you will, and kind of laying out the odds since we started talking about these boat strikes. You have this meeting now that's going to be happening at the White House to talk about next steps in Venezuela. You add all of this, add in this new detail, add in this meeting, add in the phone call between President Trump and Nicolas Maduro. How likely are land strikes now, do you think?
I think it's a 2/3 chance we're going to see some form of strikes. Let's be clear here, Kate. What I think 2/3 chance we're going to see are drones, Tomahawk missiles, maybe some manned aircraft, probably going after drug-related sites. That fits in with the narrative the administration has laid out. What I think is unlikely, kind of highly unlikely, are a significant number of boots on the ground, maybe some special forces here and there. I think even that is very high risk. So at the meeting tonight in the White House, I think the president will formally receive these options, take advice from his cabinet, make a decision. I think it's a 2 in 3 chance over the next few days this week that we see some strikes. Break. The countervailing thought would be a good one, which is the ongoing potential conversations between the president and Maduro. Let's hope President Maduro wakes up to the reality of what he's looking at and decides, now's a pretty good time to head out to a hacienda outside of Havana. I hope he does that. If not, I think strikes are 2 in 3 chance.
Let's get right to CNN Chief National Security Analyst Jim Sciutto for the latest. Again, I was struck by the fact that President Trump says, I don't know what happened, and Pete said he didn't want them. So what do we know about what actually happened?
Yeah, and Trump said he wouldn't have wanted a second strike on survivors as well. I mean, that gets to what you said correctly, John, is that there's been bipartisan question and to some degree outrage at this strike. And to be clear, there were already bipartisan questions about the strikes prior to this particular one, questions about the legal justification for using deadly force against these drug boats. Now you have this second issue, and that the first strike killed a number of those on board, but not all of them, and that U.S. forces carried out a second strike to kill the survivors. That's key because the law of war is such that not only do you not kill the wounded or the survivors of a strike, but you have some obligation to give them medical care. And if folks at home are watching this and saying, oh, but they're alleged drug dealers, et cetera, I mean, go to the Vietnam War, the World War II. U.S. medics provided medical care to wounded soldiers of enemy forces. You know, this is about the law of conflict. So now you have bipartisan investigations both in the House and the Senate. And keep in mind, these are Republican-led investigations, of course, John, because they have the majority in both the House and the Senate. And it speaks to broader questions about these operations, right? Because, as I said at the start, there were already questions, there were already demands from both Republican and Democratic lawmakers prior to this for the administration to better articulate its legal justification for any of these deadly strikes. And they have not been satisfied with those answers. Among their sources of dissatisfaction is that there's been no written legal justification given, which, as I understand it, speaking to folks on the Hill, is required for this sort of thing. So, listen, it's going to be a major issue for not just this administration, but also the Defense Department as these investigations go forward.
Yeah, and again, as Senator Angus King just said, the facts will largely dictate this. If there was a second strike, if there was a strike on survivors, that in itself may cross a line there. Then the question is, who authorized it? These are questions that will, I think, be answered over time. Jim, meanwhile, President Trump, we're learning, had some conversation with the Venezuelan leader, and this is happening sort of separate from this but connected. The Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro, what's going on there?
So President Trump acknowledged that he had a phone call. He didn't describe the phone call, and he wouldn't say whether it was a good or a bad one. He said it was just a phone call. Similar from Venezuelan officials, they won't say what was said or whether any progress was made there. But I think, John, that this is part of, it's become sort of standard to this whole Venezuela military buildup, right? That you have a buildup, but then you have a phone call. You have the president over the weekend saying, consider Venezuelan airspace closed, but then saying, hey, don't take that to mean that U.S. strikes are about to follow. There's been a theater quality to this operation, right? Because you have a good fifth of the U.S. Navy right off the coast of Venezuela right now, a force commensurate with at least the possibility of ground operations or even an invasion, which hasn't been used. And it seems that the administration's hope is just the appearance of that force, and threats like we're going to close the airspace will be enough to push Maduro from power. That hasn't happened yet. There were questions over the weekend because Maduro hadn't been seen publicly, but then he showed up at a public event there. So he certainly hasn't left yet. It raises another question, John, right? Like, what is the actual goal of this? Is the U.S. on the verge of major military action in Venezuela? Or is this for show, hoping that show of force is enough to force him from power. We just don't know. But we do know they're talking. What was said in that call? Was it an invitation to leave the country? Perhaps. We haven't seen Maduro take that yet.
These are questions that members of Congress themselves are asking right now. Jim Sciutto, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much for your reporting on all this.